Hello and welcome to the Brutal Iron Gym podcast, where our goal is to cut through the BS and deliver the brutal truth about topics related to health and happiness. So today's topic is training, and we're going to discuss weight training for the elderly. So what we're going to talk about is directed towards the elderly, and you can kind of classify this. I'm going to offend some people here, but in 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, people where their movement quality is decreased and their general physical activity of the day has decreased compared to typical normal style of life. So somebody retired and all of a sudden they're moving around a lot less. Somebody gives up, being physical in a sport, or out in the yard, and they're moving around a lot less. So someone where their movement quality is compromised in the sense of they're just not what they used to be. So you can consider that as elderly. And then I want to approach this in a broad way as well, is that this can be really for anybody, like 30s and 40s. Maybe they just don't drive, they don't exercise a lot, they're not physically active, so they're starting in a place of kind of physical compromised abilities. So this would even apply to them. So let's say it's somebody who has trouble moving themselves up and down steps, maybe getting themselves out of a low chair. They just have some general movement issues, and they kind of make noises when they move, they make noises when they stop moving, that kind of classification. So these are things that would actually apply and work for anybody of any age, but we are directing it towards kind of the elderly. But I want to recognize that this doesn't mean it's only for old people. So these are benefits for everyone. However, this is also how I train quote unquote old people. So that's the part of offending people in their 50s, 60s, and 70s. I just called you old. But to a young punk 35-year-old, you are old. And I'm sure in 20 years, I'm going to look back and know that I was a young punk. Okay. So anyhow, let's move past me offending everybody and get to the information. So the absolute most important thing, without a doubt, is strength. That's the most important thing that you need to focus on. That is more important than anything else physical wise. Somebody might say, well, what about balance? The stronger the person is, the better balance they're going to have. Okay? Well, I can't really work on strength with them because, hell, they can't even get out of a chair yet. Well, getting them stronger is going to help them out of a chair, right? Okay? If they can't even walk up a flight of stairs, getting them stronger is going to help them walk up a flight of stairs. So we have podcast 175. It was a trainer education podcast, and it was titled The Importance of Strength. And that podcast, let's just say it's roughly 30 minutes. I don't know exactly the length, but it's probably around 30 minutes. And it explains why strength is so important and why it's absolutely, without a doubt, the first place anyone training the elderly, whether you're the elderly training yourself, or whether you're a trainer or friend or somebody trying to give advice or train an older person, that podcast number 175 will tell you why strength is so darn important. So strength, one of the benefits that is specific to elderly is it helps. The stronger you are, the less stressful every day is on your life. So everyday activities. So you're going to have less arthritis, pains, because your joints and connective tissue won't take the stress of movements because you'll have strong enough muscles to take that stress. So I've worked with people with different types and forms of arthritis, and like rheumatoid arthritis, there's a bunch of other ones. But strength has, without a doubt, overwhelmingly been the biggest factor to help their arthritic issues and bring down medications. So getting them stronger helps them be more resilient and tougher to everyday life. Actually, physical strength will even help with nutritional issues, such as like blood sugar control and high blood pressure, other odds and ends. In large part, it's because in order to train for strength, you do physical activities that help the body run more efficiently and therefore burn up extra calories that they don't need, helps use up things like cholesterol and sugar in the blood. So there's a lot of factors just in regards to the training that help, but also just a stronger body. Having a body that's more resilient and stronger allows it to be better at everything, whether that's processing nutrients, whether that's walking upstairs, whether it's picking up something heavy in the yard. So strength is by far, without a doubt, 1,000,000% the first place you have to start. Now, how do you start at strength is absolutely dependent on who you're working with. So I very quickly will try to get elderly population into our leg press because it's the fastest way to get the heaviest weight on them. So I have women or guys, like I've trained guys in their 70s and 80s before, but you'll have people, okay, who can't put a barbell on their back to squat. Now, barbell is 45 pounds, by the way. So they can't even, with postural issues, a whole bunch of other issues and things going on, they can't put 45 pounds on them. That is not like, even if they could put 45 pounds is not going to make them strong. So 45 pounds is not enough pressure to fight like osteoporosis. It's not even enough pressure to really help fight like arthritis issues and things like that. Now, is it beneficial to maybe teach them how to squat? Sure, if their mechanics and stuff allow it, and if it's fun to do, there's a lot of benefits to it. But if I can get them in a leg press, so I can have people in their 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s leg pressing like 300 freaking pounds safely and correctly, and that'll actually load their ankles, knees, hips, the related joints, and the related musculature with 300 freaking pounds of pressure. Now that is really going to make them a lot stronger. So their body is going to have a stronger growth response, a stronger adaptation response to a 300-pound leg press than it ever would to a 45-pound squat. So you want to try to get them in things that allow them to move the heaviest weight possible in the safest way possible. So you don't want to dilly-daddle with light things. So even if somebody has trouble getting out of a chair, if they can get into a leg press, get them in the damn leg press. You can superset or have those exercises be back to back, where maybe you have them do 10 reps on a leg press. They'll stand up and then, sit down, stand up off of a bench or a chair, and that'll be the second exercise you're kind of pairing with leg press. But you have to get them under heavier loads. The heavier the load you can put on their bones and muscles, the faster and more dramatic response you'll have in regards to adaptation differences. So training strength and focusing on strength is by far the biggest thing in terms of importance. You have to do it safely, but you have to get weight on their bones. Okay? So I've worked with people with osteoporosis and osteopenia issues, and we've been able to stop and actually reverse bone loss effects by being able to properly, heavily load them. So I have clients in the past and even currently, they'll get bone scans done, and it shows all the time that the bone loss has stopped, if not actually reversed, in the bones and joints that we are able to load. So if they have upper body, shoulder kind of postural issues and you can't really get a lot of weight on their upper body, that's okay. Throw them in the leg press, get some bone reversal, get some bone health in their lower body at least. Get what you can, okay? And we've even seen in scans where the sockets of their hip will become more dense, even if the iliac crest, like the top part of the hip, actually is still going down or kind of like stalled in bone health. So it's what part of the bone even can you get loaded. But the more load you can get onto the bone, the better. And not only for osteoporosis issues, which is always going to be a concern, but also the muscles have to deal with that weight load. So that way the muscles will become stronger and take stress off the joints and connective tissue. So strength is going to help them feel the best and get the biggest responses in terms of overall health results. And the general way to think of it is, the stronger you get them, the less everyday life wears them out. Makes sense, right? Then the next thing you want to focus on, and you can focus on these simultaneously, but you never want to lose focus on strength, is you want to focus on balance and stability. And it's important to address both static balance and stability, but also moving balance and stability. So what that means is not only do you want to do something where they can stand still and be stable and balanced and braced, but they also need to be able to walk and be stable, balanced, and braced. So, for example, as you could have them do farmer's carries or suitcase carries, you can have them do, weighted step ups, like where they're hold hang holding dumbbells or kettlebells. You can even do goblet style loading, where it's kind of a front in front of their body loaded because it helps with posture if their shoulders and neck and upper back can handle that. But you have to get them against weight where they have to brace and stabilize, but then also move. So you can do standing still style movements, but you also have to do moving movements. So it's important that you address both forms of balance. So too often I'll see when people train the elderly, and even just regular people, they'll focus on like core stability in like a shit ton of plank variations. And I'm not anti-planks, but they're not like the only ab exercise that exists. So people need to stop worshiping planks. There's actually significantly, ridiculously better exercises than planks. Planks are pretty damn near useless unless you activate your abs and are forcefully trying to crunch your elbows to your feet, or you pull your hands to your feet, depending on whether you're in a push-up position or elbow braced position. But people who just like hang out on the plank for like 10 minutes, that's absolutely dumb. Very stupid. Because it does not make you any stronger, doesn't really fix any postural issues because you're usually staying like that for 10 minutes in a shitty position. So you want to do things that are hard and challenging. Now, there's a podcast we've done about, it's number 214. It's a training podcast titled Understanding Rep Ranges and Expected Results. And it refers to varying time under tensions of exercises and what results you get for the different time under tension ranges. So if I do an exercise that I reach mechanical failure, muscle failure at 10 seconds, I'm going to get a different response than an exercise where I reach mechanical or muscle failure at, say, 60 seconds. So 0 to 10 seconds is generally kind of displaying your strength, but it's not really enough of a hardcore stimulus duration to actually produce increased physical strength. You can increase strength through technique and a better mindset towards heavy things with 10 seconds or less. But physical strength development happens more along the lines of like 10 to 20 seconds of tension. Then 20 to 30 is kind of heavy muscle damage based activity, where if you eat in excess, you'll get bigger muscles. If you eat in a controlled caloric amount, you'll kind of get just toned, tighter muscles. And that's a good thing to help joint health and fight arthritis and stuff like that. Okay, so then 30 to 40 seconds is kind of mediumly heavy muscle damage. 40 to 60 seconds is lightweight muscle damage, getting into muscular endurance. Under no freaking circumstances is 10 minutes useful. Okay, so when you think of balancing and static stability and core bracing, planks are a category, and they're one thing you can do of many millions of other better things. Okay, so you need to have static balance, you need to have mobile balance, moving balance. So those are the big things. And then what you want to do is, how do you address those concerns? And you want to address them through what will be considered functional movements. So movements that mimic everyday life. So I know a leg press does not mimic everyday life. Okay, you're not going to go lay on the floor and push your couch away really hard, okay, with your feet. But what leg press does is it gets that heavy weight load on the bones to work against osteoporosis and increase like joint health and arthritic issues. So leg press is a way to address strength. So when you're trying to address balance and stability, you can pick more functional movements. So you want to categorize your leg movements into knee bends and hip bends, so which are also called hinges. So you want to have activities that cause them to bend at the knee, which would be like a squat, a step up, a lunge, stuff like that. You want to have things that make them bend at the hips, which would traditionally be a deadlift, a stiff leg deadlift, something where they're basically just picking up shit off the ground, okay? So that's what you want to have them do with their legs, is they want to be doing both knee bends and hip hinges, okay, hip bending movements in their lower body exercises. So you want to have an exercise that addresses pure strength. And that's either, it can be the leg press, it can be a hack squat, it can be a belt squat. So just something where they can get a heavy weight load onto their musculature and bones. So the heaviest option you can do with them safely is what you should choose. So if you have 2 or 3 options and one can be loaded 300 pounds, the other 2 can only be loaded to 100, pick the 300 pound option every damn time. Okay? So find variances in that by picking maybe variable time under tension ranges. So we know 10 to 20 seconds of time under tension is best for strength development. Well, one workout you can go for 20-second range. The other workout you can go for a 10-second range. Maybe one workout you have bands on the leg press, one workout you don't have bands on the leg press. Maybe one workout you do paused presses from the bottom. So they come down, they have to kind of pause and then press back up. Maybe the next one you have them do a deloaded press where they come down onto the safety spotters. The platform actually loads into the safety spotters, and then they have to kind of press and explode up through the platform, which is different than having constant tension on the muscle. So it's almost like a box squat for leg pressing. So you would find variable ways to do the best movement, not go away from the best movement. Okay? So you're going to have something that addresses pure strength. Then you're going to need something in your lower body that addresses balance and stability, and that's static balance and moving balance. And that's where the knee bends, hip hinges, stuff like that comes in. So the other benefit of that is when you do knee bends and hip hinges, such as like hang hold step ups or stiff leg deadlifts, maybe even like farmer's carries and things like that, you can get a lot of core bracing and stability built into your lower body movement. So if I'm doing a goblet loaded step up, I'm definitely doing a knee bend activity. I'm working their thighs, their ankle, knee, hip joints, but I'm also working core to balance and brace against that force of the goblet loaded weight. You're also working on upper body posture. So you want to try to layer as many purposes into the exercises that you're selecting. So we had a recent podcast about layering purposes. So I'm looking that up really fast for you so you can check that out. And what it does is it'll help you better select exercises that will quote unquote kill as many birds with one stone as possible. So that's podcast 415 titled Layering Purposes, How to Best Kill Birds. Okay, so you can check out that podcast to figure out, okay, if I want a knee bend or hip hinge exercise, what are going to be the best options to address as many things as I want to be able to address? So one of the things with elderly is you're not going to have the ability to do like a 1 hour, all hardcore, super intense workout where you get to fit like 8, 10, 12 exercises in there. So they're probably going to be compromised in the overall workload that they're capable of, at least initially. So you might only get 3 exercises or 4 exercises in a whole hour. So how do you kill as many birds with those 4 stones if you're only going to get 4 stones? So that's what you want to pick for lower body movements, is knee bends, hip hinges, and things that incorporate as much balance, stability, and core bracing as possible. If you don't get enough core bracing and stability from your lower body exercises, you can actually throw in extra exercises such as farmer's carries or suitcase carries, which is just a one-armed farmer's carry. So there are also overhead carries. There's a whole bunch of other type of carries that you can do. You can even push and pull a sled. That involves a lot of core bracing as well. So there's variable options. Then for upper body, you want to focus on pushing and pulling. Okay, so you have to have pushing exercises and pulling exercises. And for pushing exercises, I would argue that you at least want to have a 50-50 relationship between overhead movements to chest press style movements. And you're probably better off favoring overhead movements because it's more applicable to how we would use our upper body in everyday life. So most often for our upper body, when we push things, it's putting things up over our head. We're never really going to be chest to chest with something and then have to push it away from us. So I'm not going to walk up to my refrigerator, bump chest with it, and then try to push it away from me. Okay? So it's more common we're going to be using overheads or overhead angles. So you can do presses at, say, 30 degrees, 45 degrees, 60 degrees. And that's a very real-world applicable style of pressing. You can also have them just do standing overhead presses with dumbbells or kettlebells or whatever kind of weird object you want. And that's going to mimic everything they do in normal life. So that's what we mean by functional movements, is you want to select exercises that relate to how they move their body in everyday life. Then for back exercises, you want to include something that's maybe in a bent over position. So that way it gets their lower back and core involved. It mimics them picking something up off the floor or bending over to hold something. So that's what you want to do. Very rarely in our everyday life do we have to do a pull-up. Okay? So doing a shit ton of pull-ups with elderly doesn't really make sense. You're better off doing rows, and you're better off doing bent over rows. So your pushing exercises should favor overhead or inclined angle presses. Your back exercises should focus on rows and unsupported rows, meaning not a chest supported row. You can do one arm dumbbell rows. Those are good. You can even do a dual bent over dumbbell row. You can do a barbell row, but you don't want to do fully supported rows. So like such as dumbbell seal rows, because they never do that in regular life. And you don't need to focus on a lot of pull downs because they never pull anything down to them. Okay. So it's more commonly we're going to use rows and bent over position rows in everyday life. So those are the things you want to focus on the most. Is number one, you want to be addressing strength in the lower body push muscles and pull muscles, and even like the core and stability muscles. How do we know if we're addressing strength? You listen to podcast 214 to find out the correct rep ranges and time under tension ranges that relate to strength being the body's response. So if everything you do is light-weighted at 40 to 60 seconds of time under tension, you are not making them stronger in the most efficient manner. Will somebody get stronger if they're brand new to exercising? Yes. But it's not because you're doing anything right. It's because they suck so damn bad that they'll get results to anything. Okay? Now that's very aggressive language. I probably need to be nicer. But when you're brand new to lifting, you will get results from almost anything you do, whether it's smart or not smart. So if you want to like lose fat, you can go do jumping jacks in the corner for 30 minutes, and you're going to lose fat. But very quickly, your body would respond to that and kind of get used to it, and it would not be the most efficient way to do the process, okay? So make sure that if you are training yourself or you're training a client and you're getting results from what you're doing, don't just say, well, I'm getting results, I don't need to go listen to podcast 214. You may only be getting results because they're too new for everything yet. Once they get somewhat adapted within, say, 6 months to a year, and I would argue even 3 months at some points, you're going to really need to actually know what the hell you're doing to get more and more results. So podcast 214 tells you the correct time under tension ranges, so you know you're actually going to get strength as the result. Not that you're doing things hoping to get stronger, but you're really just working on endurance or muscle damage. Okay? So that's the first thing you want to make sure you're addressing in their training, is addressing lower body strength and strength in both knee bends and hip hinges. You want to address core strength in both static and moving strength. And you want to address push strength and pull strength, push most notably at overheads and incline angles, and pull strength most notably at rows instead of pull-ups and pull-downs. Okay, so that's going to be where you want to have your focus of training. So again, 214 is going to tell you what your rep ranges and time under tension should be. Okay, podcast 415 will help you pick the most kind of like bang for your buck style exercises. So a typical workout, for example, that I might take someone through is we're going to do a warm-up. Okay, and in podcast 407, we discuss the importance and benefits of warm-ups, and we give examples. So for example, I have a client that comes in and we have a Concept 2 ski erg, and she does reverse flies on the ski erg, which is an odd movement for a ski erg, but it's great for upper back posture, and it doesn't cause inflammation, it doesn't cause rotator cuff issues, it's just a contraction but not a weighted eccentric. So we don't have any inflammation buildup. She's just learning to contract and hold on to really good postural position while doing that movement. So she supersets reverse flies on the ski erg with seated rows on our Concept 2 rower. So we have a special type of connector that allows you to put on any handles you want onto a rower. So we put long-ended D-rings, okay, they have a long tail end, so she can do seated cable rows, like how you do in an exercise, but she can do it on a rower, which again gives her a weighted contraction, but there's no weighted eccentric, so there's no buildup of inflammation within any arthritic joints or issues. So this person actually has rheumatoid arthritis, so we don't want to be pissing that off. So this gets a lot of good blood flow into the muscles, but doesn't cause the inflammation by skipping the weighted eccentrics. So she does reverse flies on the ski erg. She does seated rows on our rower. That's for the upper body. Okay, that gets blood flow in her shoulders. It helps awareness of postural positioning, and it really gets her upper body ready for the workout. Then we go over, and on our belt squat, we do banded marches. So step up marches. So we have little 6-inch boxes that she'll step up onto and then step back down from. And she has the belt squat on her, but a banded resistance rather than plate weight resistance. Bands will actively pull you into the floor. So they have a greater degree of pressural stress through the bones and connective tissue as compared to plate weight. So she'll do banded step-up marches on our belt squat. And that helps the ankle, knee, and hip joints, helps the musculature of the calves, the thighs, so quads, hamstrings, and of the hips, the glutes, glute min, piriformis, all that stuff, hip flexors. It gets all that stuff warmed up. It helps a shit ton for balance and stability, and that's actually that's actually dynamic balance and stability. So she has to brace while moving around. So that's how we address all of that in just 3 exercises in a warm-up. Then, for the exercises of the lower body, we might do the leg press, and then maybe do hang-hold step-ups. So the leg press gets us heavy weight on the bones, works on lower body strength. Ultimate, pure, absolute strength, because she can leg press 300 some pounds. Then we do step-ups, and we'll do it at varying degrees of heights. Okay, if we want to work on balance and stability, or we'll do a lower height with a lot of weight load if we want to have more focus on the muscular development. Okay, it depends on which day we want to do. Sometimes we kind of mess around, do a little bit of each, or we do one day focused on one day focused on the other. And then instead of step-ups, maybe one day we'll do single leg, stiff leg deadlifts to work on balance and stability, but also work on hamstring looseness. And if you notice, that would be a hip hinge, whereas the step-ups were a knee bend. So we kind of switch back and forth, but make sure we're always addressing those categories. Then for upper body, we might do standing overhead press. That works on a lot more core stability again, and it's a position that she's going to use in everyday life. So lifting something over her head. We work on squeezing her glutes to protect her lower back health and keeping her rib cage pulled down so that way she's not overarching through her lower back. So we work on how to actually stand and put something over your head correctly. So she works on the strength of that movement, but also correct positioning of that movement. Then we'll pair that with dumbbell dual bent over row, which is just a bent over row with dumbbells rather than a barbell. So that way the dumbbells can be more positioned to her shoulder health and postural health. And that bent over position helps work her lower back, glutes, and hips, and work on bracing stability, so static stability. So we had dynamic stability involved in the warm-up marches, but we now have static stability involved in the overhead presses and bent over rows. So that would be an exercise, like a workout that we would go through. For the leg press, like for the warm-up stuff, like the ski erg, she does for 30 to 60 seconds. The rowers, 30 to 60 seconds. She does 3 rounds. On the marches, belt squat marches, she does 3 rounds of roughly 30 to 60 seconds. So that gives you time frames. Leg press, we work up to 3 heavy sets of 10 reps. Okay. If she can get 14 reps, we move up in weight. So that's kind of like a progressive overload style movement. Then for her secondary movement, we typically do it around, again, 10 reps. But since it's a weight or weight load and we're usually doing unilateral movements, it actually involves more cardiovascular, and it's almost like doing a regular exercise for 20 reps since she has 10 reps on each limb. So we do a lot of unilateral stuff to help address imbalances from side to side. Then for the overhead press and for the bent over row, again, we do sets of 10 because it relates to that kind of 20-ish second range where she's going to get strength development, get some muscle damage to help towards overall development of her goals and her body towards everything that we want to achieve. So that's all the exercise stuff. That was the quick version, and we're already 28 minutes into this. So hopefully this was enough to kind of spark your interest and get you thinking. And then nutritionally, okay, the big concerns are getting enough protein, which is podcast number 33, titled How Much Protein Do I Need? You want to make sure they're eating enough protein so their body can repair and fix itself after the workout to make the adaptations that our training is actually trying to promote. So without adequate protein, they will not get the results. You can do the right things in their training, but their body will not be able to respond correctly. And therefore, you won't get the results you want. So nutrition has to support the training. The second focus nutritionally is going to be filling the gas tank before use. So teaching them how to eat enough throughout the day. So that way they're not always operating on a deficit and kind of wear and tear and beating up their body. And that can contribute a lot to arthritic issues, low energy, which also reduces everyday activity and factors into poor health. So making sure they eat enough and they eat ahead of activity. is a huge thing for the elderly. So podcast 153, titled How Many Calories Do I Need?, will help you address how many calories they're going to need. Then podcast 249 addresses meal timing, is at each meal, what should they eat depending on what they're doing at that time. And then podcast 329 is meal frequency effects on diets. It'll let you understand how many meals they should have in a day based on their lifestyle and the effects that they want to achieve. So those are the 3 podcasts that help with filling the gas tank. Podcast 153, How Many Calories Do I Need? Podcast 249, which is meal timing, and podcast 329, which is meal frequency. Then the last thing that would be good to know if you are helping somebody who's elderly is how to pair sugars and carbs with protein to reduce blood sugar concerns, so diabetic concerns. And that's podcast 53, titled Controlling Blood Sugar. So that way you can help them not have energy crashes throughout the day and make sure they're adequate energy and blood sugar control throughout the day so they can have good performance but also good health. Okay, my goal of this was to get some information out there, have some good understanding for everybody to start with, and then you can check out the podcasts I mentioned, and they'll be referenced in our podcast notes. But check those out to learn more about this. So if you would like to know about how to train elderly properly, whether you are the elderly or you're working with elderly, this podcast will get you a whole bunch of information to start with, and then you'll have to kind of go with it from there. So if you have any specific questions that would help you be better able to address the issues, let us know. Okay, our email is brutalironjim@gmail.com.